Welcome to another podcast of Keeping It 99. We have our two hosts, obviously me and Wanda, and we have a special guest today, Jacob, who is my cousin, and he is graduating this year from the University of Tennessee.
Yes,
So we're just gonna get started, Jacob. So how are you doing today?
Okay.
Just okay?
I'm alive.
That's it?
That's all that matters.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what you do in architecture school.
What I do in architecture school?
Yeah, like what are some of the projects that you've worked on, stuff like that?
So first year, it's a lot of random. I remember my first project I ever did, they literally were like, go find a stick. And I was like, what? And they're like, go to a tree and just rip a branch off of it. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I had to sketch it, and I had to make there's this Japanese art called ikebana where they fold paper. Well, they don't fold paper. Ikebana is a way of arranging flowers in pots, but we used paper to make the vessel instead of an actual pot. And so that was just our first project of understanding composition, how things lay in space. And then we did some weird random things where we folded paper and made random stuff. But a lot of the projects that I've done more recently have been more focused on workplace design, and my last project was a winery. So I've done lots of things.
That's a very diverse range of things. I mean, obviously architecture is an art as much of it is as because it's put together with engineering a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your education is like. Some education is a little more on the composition art side, and some of it's more on the engineering side. I mean, I started in architecture my first year. Second year, I switched to interior architecture, which everyone thinks interior architecture is interior decoration where you pick paint colors. Well, it's not that at all. Interior architecture actually does a lot of really tough work. We do probably just as much as architects do, except for we can't. It's a political thing. We're not licensed to stamp drawings or anything like that. But we're doing technical drawings, we're doing details, we're doing floor plans, we're doing a lot of things. And a lot of what we do in architecture is not just buildings, it's also graphic design in a lot of ways. So we have to have knowledge of composition and art and graphics and text and alignment, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very broad field. If you can think about anything that relates to humans, architecture is involved somewhere.
Yeah. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, was it hard your freshman year getting into architect, or was it easy, you knew what you were gonna do?
So when I graduated high school, I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I want to do music. Because I was in band for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, Dad, this is what I know and this is what I like. And he's like, yeah, Jacob. Doctor or engineer, yalla, pick one. And I was like, okay, whatever, I guess. I like art, I like architecture-ish. I played with Legos as a kid. That's what everyone says. Oh, I love Legos. I was like, okay, that's engineering, and I like art and expression, so that's a good compromise. Yeah. So my freshman year, I was kind of well, I didn't really want to do this, but I guess it works for now. And that my first semester, I took 19 credit hours, which is the maximum you can take without approval from whatever. And I was suffering. Because the thing about architecture school that's different than high school or any other degree is there's not really a right or wrong answer. You kind of have to do whatever you want, and then you have to defend it. It's not just there's no right or wrong, and that sounds good, but it's actually not. It's actually harder because you have to defend why you think this is a good idea or a good decision. And so it was a lot different than studying for an exam and just regurgitating the information that I soaked in studying. It's no, I actually have to make something that's original, that expresses what I think, and then I have to figure out a way to defend it. So I think it was difficult in that sense, but I was also taking my freshman year lots of gen ed classes, English and math. And I was like, this is just a waste of my time. It has nothing to do with what I want to do. What?
Yeah. I mean, every degree is like that, I guess. The first year and a half of college.
Yeah, I guess. So it was weird. I'll say that.
So obviously, with architecture comes a lot of expression of your ideas and a lot of like really like expressing yourself both in your ideas and in your artwork. So how would you say, because that transition, like you used to express yourself through music, and then you had to transfer into, you know, expressing yourself through like your artwork. So how would you say like that transition was like?
So the thing about architecture is that, at least with interiors, and it's something that I focus on, is that it needs to activate all the sensory, like all the senses of the human experience. So sight, touch, smell, taste, etc., etc. And so music obviously is a part of that, right? Like music is something that extends beyond culture. Like regardless of where you're from or what language you speak or your background, like music is something that we can all relate to, and we can all, like, it brings us together. So I think part of that is part of the design process, for me at least, is understanding what kind of things can start to transcend like ideas of culture and environment. And so I think, you know, part of the transition with music is that it's something that, I know sometimes you listen to music and you don't really know why it hits you a certain way, but it does. You know, like it reminds you of a time, or reminds you of a place, or reminds you of a person or something. And I think that in a way, you want architecture to do the same. Like you want experiences to really activate like memory or aspects of that. So I don't know. I mean, I think that the transition isn't as hard as people might think it is. You just have to dig deeper. Instead of being like, oh, music versus this, it's like, what about music makes me feel a certain way? And then how can I take those concepts and apply that to space? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. To you know, to go along that, obviously artwork, architecture has, it's a lot more complex than I feel like a lot of people think, just because of like the architecture we have around us is very, very just bland. And I feel like some people just see architecture as just like a thing for money, and not necessarily for.
I got
like,
tons to talk about on this. Y'all gaslighting me right now.
And instead of like it being, you know, like a thing that people can like really enjoy, as a part of like their daily lives. So what thoughts do you have on the commercialization of architecture?
I talk about this a lot. I think a lot of it's driven by consumerism and this idea of like, it's got to be something that's cheap for the developer, and it's got to be something that's going to offer a return, right? Like you look at a lot of the buildings that are around here, and most of them probably weren't designed by an architect. They were like some engineer or some developer was just like, oh, let's make a box, but let's make this part like stick out a little more than this part. Like, yeah. But like, you have to think about it. Like, what are we actually, architecture should be about the experience. It's not just about what it looks like, right? Like no one's going to get out a lawn chair and like sit in front of a building and go like, oh man, that little bump out right. No, it's about the human experience. And we talk a lot about like psychology and thinking about like what do humans like to experience. And so if you think about humans like wandering around in nature, like they like variability and scale. Like people like being under trees, right? Because it feels more intimate, right? The space that I'm occupying is now smaller, as opposed to like me walking in like in the middle of a concrete plaza. Like it's awkward, right? Because it's like you're being observed. Like everyone can see you from all sides. There's no like place for me to retreat and to feel protected. Like I have my own space. And so I think a lot when it comes to architecture is like it shouldn't be about money. It should be about the impact that it has on community and people. Like how people feel in space. Like you want to make people comfortable. You want to make people. It's like when you go to a amusement park and you go on this one ride and you're like, man, like that was really fun. I really enjoyed like these aspects. It made me feel this certain way. Like I want to ride that again.
Yeah.
Or I want to go to this place again because it made this impact. And like I think that we do that a lot with things that are not common. Like when we go on vacation, like that's a one-time thing. We're like, oh, I want to do that again. But I think if we have better design that integrates that experience in everyday life, like we want to elevate everyday life for every person, not like this experience can only be had on a vacation by these kind of people that can afford to go wherever, right? You want to bring experience that's impactful in everyday life to as many people as you can. That's the point of design, is to really elevate people's lives every day. So I think architecture these days is, I don't even want to call it architecture. It's just like, it's like buildings. that people are making now. It's a lack of interest in what the user actually experiences and what they're feeling. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, you went to school for 4 years, like for architecture. Is there anything like you don't like about architecture or anything you dislike about it?
I think when it comes to the education part, I think there's some things that need to improve in terms of like I think we do a lot of conceptual work, but we don't do a lot of preparing for like what happens in the real world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Just
school
like,
in general.
I mean,
is like
and that's not a knock on UT. I mean, I'm very proud and honestly, the education that I got at UT is like a lot of people that have architecture degrees like don't get the education that I got. Like it was a very good education, but I think it's sort of difficult. And you know, on my final review this last semester, one of the jurors was like talking about how there was like a lack of integration of this one part of my project, and I was like, you know, that's sort of the hardship of this transition from academia to the professional world is like. In academia, you can do whatever you want. Like you can make crazy stuff because that's like, there's no client, there's no budget. Like I'm just designing whatever I want to design to activate my mind to like learn new methods and new processes. But then when you get in the real world, it's like, no, okay, I actually have a client that I need to please. I have a budget. I can't just make whatever I want. Like you have, that's when problem solving and that's when design really comes into play, when you're like, okay, I have a problem. These are my parameters. Now I have to like make something that is going to, you know, solve this problem. I say solve because usually designers create more problems than solve. But I think also there's like this really toxic like mindset of like working yourself to death in design world. Like we talk about being burnt out all the time. Like my final, this past week or 2 weeks ago, I went to our fabrication lab at 10:30 in the morning on a Thursday, or on a Wednesday. I left the lab at 9:30, came to the architecture building, and then worked from 9:45 till 7 in the morning, and then went home, took a nap, had an interview, and came back and worked until 7 p.m. that night. It's like, but like that's what you have to do. It's not like I'm just like an overachiever and that's what I choose to do. Like that's what you have to do to survive. Otherwise, it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things where the professor's like, "Why are you not in studio doing work? What are you doing? Like, if you don't care that much, then you should just like get out." It's like, bro.
I mean, I feel like that's also another like a stereotypical part of architecture, and obviously. Being family with you, I hear a lot about it. Like when you come over about
I'm like,
the amount of work that goes on. Do you feel like that all that work is really necessary? Not like to like get by in college, but like in the reality of, you know, the work itself. Is it necessary, or is it just another product of like consumerism?
I think the amount of effort is necessary. And I think actually sometimes we don't put enough effort in. And I think the reason why we don't put enough effort in the real world at least, I mean, in school it's a different story, but the timeline is so short because the client wants the project done now. Yeah. The longer that it sits is the more money that they're spending to, you know, rent equipment and, you know, permitting expire. I don't know. There's such a rush to get things done quickly, which often you sacrifice design for that because it's like, okay, if we only have a week to come up with a concept to pitch to the client, it's not enough to do research and, you know, think about the site context and think about the economic factors that, it's not enough time to consider all the things that you have to consider. And so I think that the effort is necessary. I just don't think that we're doing a great job of managing the time period in which that effort is to be exerted. Like I think if we put that same amount of effort, but we stretched a week over a month, we could probably get a lot more done. Yeah. And it'd be a lot better, but that's usually not the case.
Yeah, and I feel like that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like consumerism, not even just in architecture, but in all aspects of our life now. Obviously, society has become a very very fast-paced and very integrated with consumerism. So, like, what are your thoughts on, you know, how like how the fabric of life has changed within the last, you know, like 10, 20 years?
Oof, that's a loaded question. I think we lost a lot of humanity. And I mean that in the sense of people aren't empathetic with each other. People don't seem to have a real interest in other people. It's sort of just like, it's very transactional.
Yeah.
I give you what you want, you give me what you want, have a good day. Shakireen. Like that's
Yeah.
it, you know? And I think that we've lost the care of thinking about the decisions that we make, regardless how big or how small, what impact that could have on other people's lives. And I think, you know, that's as much true for architecture as it is for just how we treat people in our normal lives. Forget architecture, forget career, like just how we treat each other in normal life. Even families. Like, I don't know, it makes me sad, like families that like people aren't talking to each other, like, oh, we don't do business with them, we don't talk to them, we don't go, like, come on now.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's, you know, when we think about architecture or any profession, it's like, it's about efficiency. It's about filling the quota. It's about doing what we need to do in the time to, you know, make the money. There's an issue especially in this country and a lot in the West is like, we have to have a return on our profit. We have to be efficient. We have to fill the quota. We have to blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if you live to work, it's a bad life, man.
Yeah.
You should work to live. Okay. I do what I need to do. My roommate was like, I want to make so much money. Like, I want to be rolling in cash. I was like, no. Money is a means to the end. It is not the end.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be comfortable and work to support myself and my family if I have one day, and that's it. Like, that's all I need. Unfortunately, I feel like people don't have that mindset in this country. It's like, oh, we just gotta go in, do our thing, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like I went to Egypt in February,
Oof.
and
yeah,
and it's completely different. Like the pace of life, it's a lot slower.
yeah,
There's a lot more like relation between, you know, you and the person next to you, even if you don't know them.
absolutely.
Like even like the really small things, like you talk to people on the street when you're in Egypt.
You know, they say that a key to long life is talking to strangers. This keeps your mind active.
Yeah.
You in every situation, you're making subtle negotiations with people you don't even know. To be like, oh, like when's the right time to say hi, or like how do I say hi? You're thinking about every day relating to people, and those skills are unmatched. Like, you think people are gonna hire you based on your resume or your portfolio? Like, okay, they'll look at it and go like, okay, cool. But if you don't have the skills as a human to relate to people and to really like engage with people, like they're not gonna hire you.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. What skills do you think you need as an architect for like a company to hire you?
I think one is being a good communicator. That's literally what we do, is we communicate. That's probably the biggest thing, is actually communication.
I mean, it's not just in architecture and any job. In life in general, communication is key.
Communication, I think, knowing how to represent what you're trying to think visually.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to you and I'm trying to talk about something and I'm trying to explain like a little detail, like I have to be able to draw that. Like I have to be able to visually communicate that. And I think just being a good person, like just being honest and good and doing your best to provide the best for whoever needs it. Yeah, I don't know. That's like very basic, but.
No, I feel like, you know, to go with the last thing you said, like doing things that, you know, for people who need it, and making sure that, you know, you keep good quality coming out just by, you know, through like your work ethic and throughout various, like just, you know, really putting effort into what you do to really showcase to people like that you really care. I feel like it goes a very long way, not even just in architecture, but in anything you do, really. I feel like showing people effort and showing people that, you know, you really care, because you never know what it means to some people.
Exactly. That's the best thing about the profession that I'm in, is being able to see the client like use the space that you've designed for them.
Yeah.
Seeing them appreciate the effort that you put in to consider everything that they're thinking about, or everything that they're needing. But the other thing too that I was going to say is, like, hard skills, like knowing certain softwares and knowing how to use Revit or CAD or whatever, like basic knowledge, like that's good. They can teach you that. They can't teach you how to be a good person. They can't teach you how to be a good communicator. They can try, but like those are things that they are looking for. I think the most is, can you communicate? Can you be organized? Can you be a good person? You know, they can't necessarily teach you those things.
So since we keep talking about how to, what being a good person, what would you describe a good person is? We're loading you up with questions.
I don't know. I feel like that's a dangerous question to ask, because I feel like what is good is totally relative and subjective, which I guess is why you're asking me what I think, because you're asking for my subjective opinion. I don't know. Like something that's big for me is honesty, being honest. And because like, here's the thing, like if you mess up, we all mess up. Yeah. But, like if you try to like do some sneaky stuff, kid, hide, like don't do that. Just tell me like, oh, like I think that's one thing that I learned most from my internship is they told me, like, if you don't know how to do something, just tell us. We'd rather you tell us, I don't know how to do that, and us find someone else to do it, than for us to give it to you thinking you can do it, and you're just like sitting around in the back, like not doing anything because you don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Like don't be afraid to ask questions, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's...
And I think knowing your weaknesses is more important than capitalizing on your strengths.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of things that a thing that a lot of people struggle with, is, learning to ask, to not be scared to ask questions. Like I see that in school all the time.
You can't know everything.
Yeah.
You literally cannot know everything. And that's another skill too that I want to add to the list, is like, you cannot know everything. So knowing when to go to someone who knows more, right? Like knowing when to call a consultant and say, hey, I don't know, like we should have a basic understanding of structures, but like, hey, I don't know if this can be possible. So you contact your engineer. Hey, can we do this? Like you can't know that. You can't know everything. You have to reach out and ask people. You learn more from talking to people that know more than you, obviously. Like you know more from talking to people that are outside of your realm. Like we did a design build project. Like we had to design it and then we had to physically build it. And we were talking to physics professors. Like, what does it have to do with interior architect, like putting metal on a piece of wood? Like they're particle physicists. They're like talking about things that's like way above my head. But being able to talk to people that their brain thinks differently than me, like that's going to help me in the end of the day, right? Because like my brain functions a very certain way. And if I only talk to people that think that same way, and this is for life too, if I only talk to people that think the same way as me, I'm never going to grow. Yeah.
And I feel like that's a big part of specifically architecture is, getting different perspectives, because your job is all about, taking what people think, like you said earlier, and trying to make something that's good for them. It's about the client. It's about, making a space that, is intimate for them. And so you have to understand like how other people think and how their brains operate. But to go on to a different, we're gonna switch gears right now.
Sorry.
How would you define?
I'm talking too much. Is what
No, it's
I'm
not
talking
at
way
all.
too much.
No, we appreciate you being on here and speaking your wisdom with us. But I have a question for you.
Shoot.
That you're not gonna like that I asked, but I'm gonna ask anyways.
I don't know that you.
How would you define success?
Oh.
Because we were talking about this the other day. So
well, we were trying to talk about it, and you're like, no, don't.
Yeah, I said save it for the podcast.
He's like, save it for the podcast.
So how would you define success?
Success is subjective, and I think that people should define success for themselves. Figure out what your goals are. And like people think success is about money. It's not about money. For some people, it might be. They might be like, oh, I want to have $6 million in the bank account by the time I'm whatever age. Okay, if that's your goal, shoot. But for me, I think success for me is my time on earth going to benefit others or not? is what I'm going to do in every day or the decisions I make, is it going to benefit and impact other people? If it's not, then I'm wasting my time. I don't care if I'm broke. If I'm doing work for people and benefiting people, I'm good.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a very important thing that a lot of like the Western world just does not.
The Western world.
The Western world.
You sound
Not
so
even just
Egyptian.
okay.
You
Not,
sound so Egyptian.
I mean, it's everyone in general. It's not just the Western world, but just because we live in it, it's a lot more potent. It's a lot more like obvious, and I feel like, you know, everything's about money. Everything's about prestige. Everything's about power, and it loses a lot of like person to person connection.
Yeah.
You know. However, Mona, I'd like to ask you the same question. How do you define success?
It's a good question.
Filus.
Yeah.
No, just,
I mean, success to me is.
It's a tough question, because like the thing with what success is that a lot of people compare themselves to other people. And the issue with comparing yourself to other people is that not everyone has the same skill set, not everyone has the same goals, not everyone has the same situations. And so trying to, and I find myself doing this a lot, like finding, you know, yourself comparing to other people makes you feel like a lot worse, and like you feel a lot more like a failure, I guess, than what you really are, because you don't see where your worth is.
Yeah.
Like you try to find your worth in things that you're just not like, you know, really.
I think success for me, like when you brought up goals, achieving my goals, like my current goals, not my long-term goals.
Like your short-term goals?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, like we talked about in the last podcast, one of the best things you can do for yourself is like setting goals, writing them down.
We talked about this in the car today.
Yeah,
Did
we
you set your goals or?
Did I have set them. I've not written them down yet.
Oh, okay.
But to set your goals, write them down, and like really push yourself to achieve them, whether it's in the time frame that you envisioned or not. But I feel like that's something that's what should be success, at least on a fundamental level, to most people, because I feel like even for me, comparing to other people is just not. It's not healthy to define that as like success.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that too. Is something that you mentioned that I think is important is everybody has a story, right?
Yeah.
Like people will look at other people and be like, "Oh my God, they're so successful. They have so much money." It's like, okay, maybe, but they might be like deep down inside, they might hate themselves. Just because they have money doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like there are other people maybe that like we don't like. We're like, oh, they're bad. Oh, they're this, they're that, right? But like you have to think about where people come from and their experiences. Like, and it's sort of one of those things that, not to make this religious, but like one of those things where it's like we don't like the sin, but we love the sinner kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't go to people and be like, oh, like that person's a jerk or that person's stupid or that person's whatever. Like you don't know what their background is. You might not know where they come from or what they've dealt with, right? And so it's one of those cases where you approach people in a way where you are very merciful with them, and you approach them in a way that you want to love them and help them through whatever they're going through, regardless of who they are or what they're doing. And even if someone's more successful than you, like that's something for me that I always say, like if someone knows something more than I do, instead of getting mad and be like, oh, they're just privileged, like, oh, their parents probably paid for this, their parents like, if you're better than me at something, I want to learn from you.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel
there's
like
no point in like getting mad at people for being better than you at something.
Yeah, but it's
Like learn.
we talked about this like on a last episode, but like the pride gets to you, especially as a man. Like you don't want to admit that someone knows something, or you don't want to admit that someone's better than you.
What is that? Come on. Come on. No. Listen, God gave us all sensibility. He gave us a mind to think with, and he gave us a heart to be in conversation with that mind, to sort of say like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what my brain wants me to do. But like I have to take a step back. Like, what do I actually want? Like, what is a life that I want to lead? What do I want to be known for? Right? And humility is like that's the one thing. Like I want to be known for as someone who is humble and you know, if I don't know something, I want to learn from someone else. And I think we have to get rid of that idea of like I said earlier, I have to know everything. I can't be wrong. I can't let my wife tell me I can't have someone else lower than me or like not as good as me tell me something. Like no. Take the like I ask, like that's something I also think is important, is asking for feedback all the time.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that
reflection.
Yeah, like personal reflection, asking others for. It's. I feel like for a lot of people, some people think when you ask other people like what they really think about like certain things, either like your actions or things that you do. A lot of people feel like that's like flaunting or like
trying to act like
But like honestly, if it really depends on like how you come to it. If you come to it with like a humble approach and like you really want to learn, people are going to give you, you know, the response that that you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And I feel like that goes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about every single question has a person behind it, has a story behind it, has, you know, a point of view behind it. And I feel like in order to really answer the question, you have to understand, you know, like the like where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that as like a society that we need, like instead of getting defensive when people ask us questions that are challenging, or people ask us questions that are, that we really don't know how to answer. Sometimes we just need to understand like why are they really asking us this.
Well, I think it's also important too. Like we don't always have to have the answer. Like you could just say I don't know, or like let me think about that, or whatever. You know. I was just gonna say something else in regards to that, but it's slipped.
That's fine. I think that'll actually wrap this one up.
Oof.
We are definitely going to get you back on.
I talk too much. I'm sorry.
No, you don't talk.
Long answers to your very short questions.
Well, that's because they're good short questions. That's why. Oh. That's why they're good questions. That's why.
Good hosts.
That's why the answers have to be long. But thank you for being on this. We really appreciate it, and we're definitely gonna get you on another time because I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'm moving to Chicago soon.
Yeah, don't worry.
Big boy job.
Yeah, we'll get you back. Don't worry about that. We'll still you
come
for
to Chicago.
Maybe we'll make a keep it a 99 business trip up to Chicago. All right. Well, thank you for being on here, and thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, and comment. And hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.